Commander Zethkar had seen countless battles across the galaxy. His forearms moved with practiced efficiency across the command console as another skirmish began in the Outer Rim territories. The view screen showed the familiar dance of warfare, energy beams cutting through space, shields flaring against incoming fire, ships maneuvering in predictable patterns. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had orchestrated hundreds of such engagements. His species, the Corthani, were known throughout the Galactic Federation as master strategists. Their ability to process multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously made them natural fleet commanders. "Enemy forces consist of 12 Vrexian raiders, sir," reported his tactical officer. "Standard configuration. They're attempting to breach our defensive perimeter around the mining station." Zethkar's secondary eyes scanned the tactical display while his primary eyes remained fixed on the main screen. The Vrexians were raiders, nothing more. They followed predictable attack patterns, used standard weapons, and retreated when casualties reached acceptable limits. This would be over within the hour. "Deploy fighters in Formation 7, he ordered. "Target their lead vessels first. They'll withdraw once we disable 30% of their fleet." The battle proceeded exactly as expected. Vrexian ships fired their plasma cannons in wide arcs, hoping to overwhelm Federation shields through sheer volume. Federation forces responded with precise strikes, targeting engine systems and weapon arrays. It was a dance both sides knew well, aggressive enough to claim territory, restrained enough to avoid true devastation. Zethkar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as 3 Vrexian ships limped away, their engines damaged, but crews alive. This was how civilized warfare worked. Rules were followed. Limits were respected. No one sought total annihilation. That was when his communications officer received an unexpected transmission. "Sir, we're getting a distress signal from the Kepler Mining Consortium. It's from the human colony at Kepler 442b. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in mild interest. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. They were considered a curiosity, bipedal mammals with a tendency toward emotional responses, but generally harmless. Their military was small, their technology adequate but unimpressive. "What's their situation?" he asked, more out of protocol than genuine concern. "Vrexian raiders have attacked their mining operation. They're requesting immediate assistance. The attack began 3 hours ago." 3 hours. That was unusual. Most raids lasted 30 minutes at most. Either the humans had something particularly valuable, or they were putting up more resistance than expected. "Set course for Kepler 442b, Zethkar commanded. "We'll assess the situation and provide standard assistance." As his fleet jumped to hyperspace, Zethkar reviewed the tactical data on human military capabilities. Their ships were smaller than Federation standard, their weapons less sophisticated. They relied heavily on kinetic projectiles rather than energy weapons, which seemed primitive to most galactic civilizations. The journey to Kepler 442b took 47 minutes. When they dropped out of hyperspace, Zethkar expected to find the aftermath of a typical raid: damaged installations, a few destroyed ships, and humans grateful for Federation intervention. Instead, he found something that would change his understanding of warfare forever. The space around the human colony was filled with debris, but not in the pattern he expected. Vrexian ship components drifted in clusters, suggesting catastrophic destruction rather than tactical disabling. Energy readings indicated weapons fire of unusual intensity, and the radiation signatures were unlike anything in Federation databases. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, all 4 of his eyes wide with confusion. "I'm reading 17 destroyed Vrexian vessels. Complete destruction, not tactical disabling. 17 ships destroyed in 3 hours. By humans, are you certain of these readings?" Zethkar demanded. "Confirmed, sir. And sir, there are still Vrexian forces engaged with the human defenders. The battle is ongoing." On the view screen, Zethkar watched something that defied every principle of civilized warfare he had ever learned. Human ships, smaller and apparently outgunned, were pursuing Vrexian raiders with relentless determination. Instead of the careful, measured exchanges he was accustomed to, he witnessed something raw and primal: a human destroyer, its hull scarred by multiple impacts, rammed directly into a Vrexian cruiser, rather than attempting to disable it from a safe distance. The explosion was magnificent and terrible, taking both ships in a ball of superheated plasma. "By the void," whispered his weapons officer. "They're fighting like they have nothing to lose." But Zethkar was beginning to realize that wasn't quite right. As he watched human ships pursue fleeing Vrexians with single-minded fury, as he saw them sacrifice their own vessels for tactical advantage, he understood something fundamental had shifted. They weren't fighting like they had nothing to lose. They were fighting like they had everything to protect. And in that moment, as another human ship detonated its own reactor to eliminate 3 Vrexian raiders, Commander Zethkar realized he had never truly seen battle before. He had only seen the pale shadow that civilized species called warfare. Real battle, he was learning, looked nothing like what he had practiced for centuries. Real battle was what happened when someone threatened the things humans cared about. The distress signal had stopped transmitting hours ago, but the fighting had not stopped. It had only intensified. And Zethkar was about to discover exactly what human rage looked like when given form and purpose. The human communication came through on emergency frequencies, cutting through the battle noise with crystalline clarity. The voice belonged to someone who had been fighting for hours, but there was no exhaustion in it, only cold, focused anger. "Federation vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran defense ship Retribution. We appreciate your offer of assistance, but we don't need rescue. We need you to stay clear of our engagement zone." Zethkar found himself speechless for the first time in decades. In all his experience, distressed colonies pleaded for immediate intervention. They didn't warn Federation forces to keep their distance. "Captain Chen," he replied, "this is Commander Zethkar of the Federation fleet. Our sensors indicate you're heavily outnumbered. We can provide tactical support and evacuation assistance for your civilian population." There was a pause, during which Zethkar watched another human ship execute a maneuver that violated every principle of safe combat flying. The vessel, a converted mining hauler, used its industrial cutting lasers to slice through a Vrexian raider's hull like it was made of paper. "Commander, with respect, evacuation isn't an option. They killed civilians. Children." The human captain's voice carried a quality Zethkar had never heard before. Rage so pure it had crystallized into something beyond emotion. "We're not retreating. We're not negotiating. We're finishing this." Zethkar's tactical display showed the impossible. Human forces, outnumbered 3-1 at the start of the engagement, had somehow reduced Vrexian numbers to near parity. But the cost had been enormous. Nearly half the human ships showed critical damage, and several had been destroyed entirely. Yet they continued fighting with an intensity that made no tactical sense. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "I've been monitoring human communications. The Vrexians didn't just attack military targets. They targeted the colony's school complex and medical facilities first. Civilian casualties are extensive." The pieces began forming a picture in Zethkar's mind. In Federation space, such attacks were unthinkable. Civilians were off limits by ancient treaty, protected by laws that even the most aggressive raiders respected. Violations resulted in immediate and overwhelming response from multiple species. But humans were new to galactic society. They hadn't been part of the treaty negotiations, and apparently, someone had made the mistake of thinking they were defenseless. On his screen, Zethkar watched a human fighter pilot deliberately crash his damaged ship into a Vrexian command vessel. The pilot had ejected seconds before impact. But the message was clear. Humans would sacrifice anything to ensure their enemies paid for their crimes. "Captain Chen," Zethkar transmitted again, "our protocols require us to offer mediation. Perhaps we can negotiate a ceasefire." The laughter that came through the comm channel was unlike anything in Zethkar's experience. It held no humor, only a sound like breaking glass mixed with distant thunder. "Negotiate? Commander, they shot up a nursery. They killed 8-year-old kids who were playing in a park. There's nothing to negotiate. There's only making sure this never happens again." Another human ship appeared on sensors, this one broadcasting civilian registration codes. It was a cargo hauler that had been hastily fitted with mining equipment repurposed as weapons. Zethkar watched in fascination as it deployed a swarm of modified ore drones, each one packed with explosives and guided by suicidal precision toward Vrexian targets. "This is irregular," his tactical officer observed. "They're using civilian vessels in combat operations. They're ignoring established rules of engagement. They're not even trying to disable enemy ships, they're destroying them completely. Zethkar nodded slowly. Everything the humans were doing violated the careful protocols that governed civilized warfare. They were writing new rules with weapons fire and fury, rules that seemed to prioritize absolute victory over measured response. A new voice joined the human communications channel. This one belonged to someone older, someone who spoke with the authority of command despite obvious exhaustion. All human vessels, this is Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Defiant. I want every Vrexian ship that participated in the attack on civilian targets eliminated. No survivors. No prisoners. We send a message today that touching human children carries a price no one wants to pay. Zethkar felt his four hearts skip in synchronization. Complete elimination of enemy forces was a concept so foreign to Federation, thinking that it barely existed in their tactical databases. Even the most aggressive species maintained some restraint, some recognition that today's enemy might be tomorrow's trading partner. But as he watched human forces coordinate with mathematical precision to execute exactly what their admiral had ordered, Zethkar began to understand something profound about this young species. They didn't see warfare as a game with rules. They didn't view conflict as a diplomatic tool with acceptable losses. When someone threatened their children, humans transformed warfare into something primal and absolute. A Vrexian cruiser, badly damaged and attempting to retreat, sent out surrender signals. Standard Federation protocol required accepting such surrenders and providing safe passage for withdrawal. The humans destroyed it anyway. By the void, whispered Zethkar. They're not just fighting. They're teaching a lesson. And as more human ships emerged from the planet's shadow, clearly reinforcements that had been traveling for hours to join the battle, he realized the lesson was far from over. The reinforcements changed everything. What Zethkar had initially assumed was a desperate last stand by colonial defenders revealed itself as something far more organized and terrifying. The new human ships didn't arrive in the scattered formation of a hastily assembled rescue force. They came in perfect attack formation, as if they had been planning this response for hours. Sir, I'm detecting 37 additional human vessels approaching from multiple vectors, his sensor operator reported. Configurations suggest both military and civilian craft, but he paused, manipulating his controls with increasing confusion. Sir, the civilian ships are radiating weapon signatures I don't recognize. Zethkar focused his primary eyes on the tactical display. The approaching human fleet included cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining vessels, and even what appeared to be pleasure craft. Every single one had been hastily but effectively armed. They've militarized their entire civilian fleet, he murmured, struck by the implications. How long would such modifications take? Based on the weapon configuration, sir, I estimate 12 to 16 hours of continuous work. They would have had to begin modifications immediately after the attack began. 16 hours. The humans had been preparing for war while simultaneously fighting it. They had mobilized their entire civilization in response to a single raid on a single colony. Captain Chen's voice crackled through communications again, now addressing the arriving fleet. This is retribution. We've eliminated 43 Vrexian vessels. 17 remain in system, attempting to regroup near the gas giant. They're yours. The response came from multiple ships simultaneously, a chorus of acknowledgement that carried no mercy and no hesitation. Zethkar listened to the coordination between vessels and realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, an entire species moving with unified purpose toward absolute vengeance. A converted passenger liner, the New Horizon, broke from formation and accelerated directly toward the remaining Vrexian forces. Zethkar watched in mounting amazement as it deployed dozens of small craft, escape pods that had been converted into guided missiles, each one piloted by a volunteer seeking revenge. This is insane, his weapons officer breathed. They're using their own people as ammunition. But Zethkar was beginning to see the terrible logic of it. Each converted escape pod represented someone who had lost family or friends in the attack. Each volunteer pilot was delivering personal vengeance along with explosive payload. The Vrexians, veteran raiders who had terrorized the Outer Rim for decades, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. Instead of fighting to defend territory or resources, the humans were fighting to ensure that no one would ever again mistake them for easy targets. A Vrexian commander transmitted on open frequencies, clearly hoping Federation forces would mediate. Federation vessel, we invoke the salvage rights accords. We are withdrawing from this system. The engagement is concluded. Zethkar found himself in an unprecedented position. The salvage rights accords were ancient law, respected throughout the galaxy. Raiders who invoked them were granted safe passage to withdraw, preventing conflicts from escalating beyond manageable levels. But when he began to respond, Captain Chen's voice cut across the channel. Commander Zethkar, I strongly advise you not to interfere. The accords don't apply here. We're not a Federation member world, and we don't recognize any agreement that protects child killers. The legal implications hit Zethkar like physical blows. Humans were technically correct. They hadn't signed the accords because they hadn't been considered significant enough to include in galactic law. They existed in a legal gray area that no one had anticipated, which meant they were free to write their own rules. On his view screen, Zethkar watched the New Horizon launch a final wave of converted escape pods. Each one transmitted a brief message before impact. Names of children who had died in the attack. Families destroyed. Lives ended before they had truly begun. The Vrexian fleet, hardened raiders who had faced every major military force in the galaxy, broke formation and scattered in genuine panic. They had encountered something they had no protocols for dealing with, like an enemy that measured victory not in territorial gains, but in complete elimination of threat, sir. His communications officer reported quietly, I'm monitoring Vrexian emergency frequencies. They're transmitting warnings to their base fleets. They're terrified. Zethkar nodded slowly. Fear was a weapon humans wielded with surgical precision. Not fear of death, most species understood that risk. But fear of encountering an enemy so driven by rage that death was preferable to allowing a threat to escape. A human mining vessel, the Iron Will, pursued the last escaping Vrexian raider with relentless determination. The raider had superior speed and firepower, but the human ship had something else entirely. Absolute refusal to let the enemy survive. Zethkar watched as the Iron Will overloaded its reactor, channeling power far beyond safe parameters. The ship began to glow with dangerous energy buildup, but it continued acceleration, closing the distance with mechanical certainty. The Vrexian raider transmitted desperate surrender signals. The human ship ignored them entirely. When the Iron Will finally caught its target, the resulting explosion was visible from Zethkar's position several thousand kilometers away. Both ships vanished in a brief star, taking with them the last Vrexian vessel in the system. In the sudden silence that followed, Zethkar realized he was witnessing the birth of a new kind of warfare. One that would reshape how every species in the galaxy thought about conflict, aggression, and the terrible price of threatening human children. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had sent a message that would echo across the stars for generations. The aftermath was more disturbing than the battle itself. Zethkar had expected the humans to begin recovery operations immediately, to tend their wounded and assess damage to their colony. Instead, they systematically swept the entire system, hunting for any trace of Vrexian presence with methodical thoroughness. Federation vessel, Captain Chen transmitted, we're detecting several Vrexian reconnaissance drones in the outer system. We're moving to eliminate them. Captain, those are likely automated observation posts, Zethkar replied. They pose no immediate threat. Standard protocol suggests cataloging their positions for later diplomatic discussions. The pause that followed carried weight. When Chen spoke again, her voice held the patience of someone explaining something obvious to a child. Commander, you still don't understand. There won't be any diplomatic discussions. Every piece of Vrexian technology in this system will be destroyed. Every data cache will be eliminated. When this is finished, they'll have nothing to report back to their clans. They'll have only rumors and terror. Zethkar watched human ships spread throughout the system like antibodies hunting infection. They moved with coordination that suggested extensive planning, but he was beginning to realize the planning hadn't started after the attack. Humans had been preparing for this kind of response since they first encountered hostile alien life. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, I've been analyzing human communication patterns during the engagement. They're not improvising tactics. They've drilled these scenarios extensively. This entire response appears to be based on pre-existing battle plans. The implication struck Zethkar with cold clarity. While other species had assumed humans were peaceful newcomers to galactic civilization, humanity had been quietly preparing for the possibility that someone might mistake their civility for weakness. A human science vessel, the Carl Sagan, approached one of the Vrexian observation drones. Instead of simply destroying it, the ship deployed sophisticated hacking equipment. Zethkar watched in fascination as humans systematically penetrated the drone's data systems. "What are they doing?" his tactical officer asked. The answer came through intercepted human communications. "This is Carl Sagan. We've accessed their communications logs, uploading navigation data to Fleet Command. We now have locations for 17 Vrexian staging areas and their main base." Zethkar felt his secondary heart stop entirely. Humans weren't just defending their colony. They were gathering intelligence for future operations. This wasn't a defensive action. It was reconnaissance for a war. "Captain Chen," he transmitted urgently, "surely you don't intend to pursue Vrexian forces into their own territory." "Not immediately," came the reply. And Zethkar felt brief relief until Chen continued. "We need time to build proper warships. Our current fleet is mostly improvised defensive platforms. But yes, Commander, we absolutely intend to visit every Vrexian base that participated in planning this attack." The human approach to warfare was becoming clear to Zethkar, and it terrified him more than any weapon he had ever seen. Other species fought to achieve objectives, territory, resources, strategic advantage. Humans fought to ensure their enemies could never threaten them again. A new voice joined the communications network, speaking with authority that suggested high political rank. "This is Director Martinez of the Terran Colonial Administration. Commander Zethkar, we appreciate Federation concern for this situation, but we want to make our position absolutely clear. Any species that targets human civilians will face unlimited retaliation. Not proportional response. Not measured escalation. Unlimited retaliation until the threat is permanently eliminated." Zethkar had served in dozens of conflicts between species with varying philosophies of warfare. Some sought dominance, others resources, still others simple survival. But humans had just announced something unprecedented in galactic history. They would pursue total war as a response to attacks on civilians. "Director Martinez," Zethkar said carefully, "such a policy could destabilize the entire region. The Federation exists to prevent unlimited escalation. The Federation exists to protect its members." Martinez replied, "We're not members. We're something else entirely. We're the species that someone just taught not to trust that civilized behavior guarantees civilized treatment." On Zethkar's screens, human vessels continued their systematic elimination of Vrexian technology. But he noticed something else. They were also scanning everything, recording every detail, building comprehensive databases of enemy capabilities and weaknesses. A human destroyer approached a damaged Vrexian fighter that had been missed in the initial sweep. The pilot was clearly alive, transmitting distress signals. Zethkar expected the humans to capture the survivor for intelligence purposes. Instead, they destroyed the fighter without hesitation. "They're not taking prisoners," his weapons officer observed. "No," Zethkar agreed quietly. "They're sending a message. Attack human civilians and your species earns extinction." The terrible efficiency continued for hours. Human ships methodically eliminated every trace of Vrexian presence, while simultaneously conducting detailed reconnaissance of their own system's vulnerabilities. They were learning from their own near disaster, ensuring it could never be repeated. As the human fleet finally began to withdraw toward their colony, Zethkar received one final transmission from Captain Chen. "Commander, you've witnessed something today that I hope you never see again. But I want you to understand. This is what happens when someone kills our children. We don't negotiate with child killers. We don't show mercy to child killers. We eliminate child killers and everything connected to them." Zethkar found himself nodding despite the horror of it all. Humans had revealed something fundamental about their nature. They were capable of becoming the most dangerous species in the galaxy when properly motivated, and someone had just provided that motivation. 6 weeks after the Kepler incident, Zethkar found himself summoned to Federation Command's Strategic Planning Center on Axiom Prime. The massive station orbited a binary star system, its crystalline spires housing the greatest military minds from dozens of species. He had expected to provide a routine incident report and return to patrol duties. Instead, he walked into a crisis meeting that included fleet admirals, intelligence directors, and strategic analysts from across the Federation. Commander Zethkar, Admiral Thexani began, her serpentine form coiled around a specialized command chair. Your report on human combat capabilities has generated considerable discussion. Some of our analysts believe you may have exaggerated the threat level. Zethkar's four eyes focused on the assembled officers. Admiral, I documented everything. The tactical recordings are available for review. We've reviewed them, interjected Director Koss, the Melody intelligence chief. What we see is an emotional species that got lucky against overconfident raiders. The Vrexians were careless and humans took advantage of that carelessness. Before Zethkar could respond, alarms began echoing throughout the command center. Emergency channels activated, broadcasting urgent distress signals from the outer rim. This is Captain Voltar of the Hegemony Cruiser Dominance. The transmission crackled. We are under attack by human forces in the Rigel system. Request immediate assistance. By the void, they're not stopping. We surrender! We surrender! They're ignoring our surrender. Admiral Thexani's eyes narrowed to slits. What's a Hegemony vessel doing in Federation space? The answer came from the tactical display. The Rigel system housed a joint Federation human research station, established just 1 month ago as part of humanity's integration into galactic society. If Hegemony forces were attacking it, they're testing human resolve, Zethkar said quietly. Just as Captain Chen predicted, the transmissions from Rigel continued, each one more desperate than the last. They've destroyed our escort fleet. Human vessels are pursuing our command ship. We invoke the Accords of Sanctuary. We invoke the Accords. Director Koss manipulated his console, pulling up real-time sensor data from Federation monitoring stations. I'm reading. This can't be right. 17 Hegemony warships engaged with 6 human vessels. Correction, came an update from the sensors operator. 12 Hegemony warships. 5 have been destroyed in the last 4 minutes. Zethkar watched the tactical display with grim familiarity. The human ships moved with the same relentless purpose he had witnessed at Kepler, but their effectiveness had improved dramatically. These weren't converted civilian vessels. These were purpose-built warships designed with 6 weeks of lessons learned from their first encounter. Patch me through to the human fleet, Admiral Thexani commanded. The response came immediately. Federation Command, this is Admiral Rodriguez aboard the TDS Retribution. Be advised that we are engaged in lawful defense of Federation facilities against Hegemony aggression. Admiral Rodriguez, this is Admiral Thexani, Federation Fleet Command. We appreciate your defense of the research station, but surely you can accept the Hegemony surrender at this point. The laugh that echoed through the command center was the same sound Zethkar remembered from Captain Chen, glass breaking mixed with distant thunder. Admiral, the Hegemony didn't attack the research station. They attacked the nursery we built next to it. 47 children ages 3 to 8 were killed in their opening barrage. There will be no acceptance of surrender. Silence filled the command center. Every species represented among Federation Command understood the implication. The Hegemony had deliberately targeted human children to test human resolve. They had succeeded beyond their worst nightmares. Admiral Rodriguez, Thexani tried again. The Accords of Sanctuary are ancient law. Even the most aggressive species respect them. We're not the most aggressive species, Admiral. We're something else entirely. We're the species you teach your children to fear when they won't go to sleep. And someone just reminded us why. On the tactical display, the remaining Hegemony ships scattered in full retreat, but human vessels pursued with mechanical precision, running down each fleeing ship despite their speed disadvantage. How are they catching ships with superior velocity? Director Koss demanded. Zethkar studied the pursuit patterns. They're not trying to catch them. They're herding them, driving them toward predetermined intercept points. As he spoke, new contacts appeared on the display. More human ships, perfectly positioned to eliminate the retreating Hegemony forces. The coordination required for such tactics suggested planning that had begun weeks ago. They knew this was coming, Zethkar breathed. They've been preparing for someone to test them again. The final Hegemony transmission was brief and terrified. This is dominance. Human forces have surrounded us. They're demanding we transmit our base coordinates and fleet deployments. If we refuse, they'll execute our crew one by one and broadcast it to Hegemony Command. That's a war crime. Director Koss protested. Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through any discussion. Director, we're no longer bound by your definitions of criminal behavior. We're operating under human law now, and human law is very simple. Hurt our children, face extinction. Within hours, the Rigel engagement was over. 18 hegemony warships had been eliminated completely. No survivors, no prisoners, no witnesses except the sensor recordings that human forces deliberately transmitted to every major power in the region. They're not just winning battles, Admiral Thexani observed. They're broadcasting warnings to every species that might consider testing them. Zethkar nodded grimly. Admiral, I think we need to reconsider humanity's status in galactic civilization. They're not the junior partners we thought we were welcoming. They're the apex predators we accidentally taught to hunt. The implications settled over the command center like a heavy shadow. The galaxy had just watched a species transform from peaceful colonists to remorseless destroyers in the span of 6 weeks, and everyone understood that this was only the beginning. 1 year after the Kepler incident, Commander Zethkar stood on the observation deck of his new flagship, watching the most remarkable sight in galactic history. Before him stretched the human defensive perimeter, a network of fortress worlds, battle stations, and patrol fleets that had transformed human space into the most heavily defended territory in known civilization. But more striking than the military infrastructure was what surrounded it. A procession of ships from dozens of species, all flying diplomatic flags, all requesting the same thing, protection. Sir, his communications officer reported, the Altarian delegation is requesting permission to enter human space. They're offering tribute in exchange for defensive treaties. Zethkar nodded absently. The Altarians were the 17th species this month to seek human protection from raiders, pirates, and aggressive neighbors. Humanity had become what every other species had failed to achieve, the guardians of galactic peace through the simple expedient of making aggression too expensive to survive. Any response from the human authorities? He asked. Admiral Chen, she was promoted after Rigel, has agreed to meet with them. Standard terms appeared to apply. The standard terms were elegantly simple. Species under human protection agreed to follow specific rules. No attacks on civilian populations, no territorial aggression against weaker neighbors, and absolute prohibition against targeting children. In exchange, they received guaranteed defense against any aggressor. The system worked because everyone understood the enforcement mechanism. Attack a human protectorate and face the same fate as the Vrexian clans and the Hegemony Confederacy. Complete elimination. Zethkar's personal communicator chimed, indicating an incoming message from Admiral Chen herself. Over the past year, they had developed an unusual friendship based on mutual professional respect and shared experience of humanity's transformation. Commander, her image appeared in holographic form. I wanted to thank you for your report to Federation Command. It helped them understand what we were becoming before anyone made fatal miscalculations. Admiral, I merely documented what I observed, though I admit even I underestimated the scope of your species' response. Chen smiled, and Zethkar noted that her expression now held warmth again. The cold fury he had witnessed during combat had receded, replaced by the satisfaction of someone whose children were finally safe. We never wanted to become what we became, she said. But the galaxy taught us that peaceful species get their children killed, so we became something else. Through his observation window, Zethkar watched a human patrol fleet conducting exercises. Their movements displayed the lethal efficiency he had first witnessed at Kepler, but now refined through a year of constant warfare against those who had tested human resolve. The Federation Council has been debating humanity's status, he reported. Some members believe you should be granted full membership and fleet command authority. And others? Others believe you're too dangerous to integrate into our existing command structure. Chen nodded thoughtfully. They're probably right about that. We don't fight by their rules anymore. We can't afford to. A year of watching human military operations had taught Zethkar exactly what she meant. When the Saurian Empire had attacked a human colony world, expecting quick conquest of a young species, they had encountered something unprecedented. Humans hadn't just defended themselves, they had tracked down every Saurian military installation in 3 sectors and eliminated them systematically. When the Nexus cartels had attempted to establish slave markets in human territory, Humanity's response had been swift and absolute. Not only had they destroyed the cartels, they had liberated every slave world the criminals controlled and established permanent defense stations to prevent re-establishment. "Admiral, may I ask you something?" Zethkar said. "Do you ever regret what your species became?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, her eyes focusing on something beyond the camera range. "Commander, do you know what human children are doing today?" "I'm afraid I don't understand the question." "They're playing. In parks and schools, in playgrounds throughout human space. They're learning and laughing and growing up without fear. That's what we became dangerous to protect." She gestured toward her own view screen, which showed images of human colonies throughout their territory. Children ran through gardens under protective energy shields. Families gathered for celebrations under the watch of orbital defense platforms. "Every species that tests us now knows the price," Chen continued. "Every pirate, every slaver, every aggressor understands that touching human children means facing something worse than death, facing absolute elimination." Zethkar found himself nodding. In 1 year, humanity had transformed the entire galactic balance of power through the simple principle of unlimited retaliation for attacks on civilians. "The galaxy is safer now," he observed. "It's safer for children," Chen corrected. "That's all we ever wanted." A new alert appeared on Zethkar's display. Another species requesting human protection. This time the Peaceful Harmony Collective, whose worlds had been threatened by expansionist neighbors. "You'll accept them?" he asked. "Of course. That's what we do now. We protect those who can't protect themselves." Zethkar marveled at the irony. Humanity had become the most feared species in the galaxy, in order to become its greatest protectors. They had embraced the role of apex predator to ensure that predation itself became impossible. "Admiral, one final question. What happens when there are no more aggressors? When every potential threat has been eliminated or deterred?" Chen's smile widened, and for the first time since Kepler, Zethkar saw genuine joy in her expression. "Then we go back to being what we were before someone taught us to be dangerous. We go back to exploring, learning, building, and raising our children in peace." As their communication ended, Zethkar remained on his observation deck, watching the steady stream of ships seeking human protection. The galaxy had learned a fundamental lesson about humanity. They were perhaps the most peaceful species ever encountered, right up until the moment someone threatened their children. After that, they became something else entirely. Something that every parent in the galaxy could understand and respect. They became the guardians who ensured that no child, of any species, would ever again face harm from those who mistook civilization for weakness. Battle had been routine until humanity showed him what true protective rage looked like. Now, because of that rage, battle might become routine again. Routine because potential aggressors understood the price of aggression far too well to pay it. 6 weeks after the Kepler incident, Zethkar found himself summoned to Federation Command's Strategic Planning Center on Axiom Prime. The massive station orbited a binary star system, its crystalline spires housing the greatest military minds from dozens of species. He had expected to provide a routine incident report and return to patrol duties. Instead, he walked into a crisis meeting that included fleet admirals, intelligence directors, and strategic analysts from across the Federation. "Commander Zethkar," Admiral Thexani began, her serpentine form coiled around a specialized command chair. "Your report on human combat capabilities has generated considerable discussion. Some of our analysts believe you may have exaggerated the threat level." Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on the assembled officers. "Admiral, I documented everything. The tactical recordings are available for review." "We've reviewed them," interjected Director Koss, the Melody intelligence chief. "What we see is an emotional species that got lucky against overconfident raiders. The Vrexians were careless and humans took advantage of that carelessness." Before Zethkar could respond, alarms began echoing throughout the command center. Emergency channels activated, broadcasting urgent distress signals from the Outer Rim. "This is Captain Voltar of the Hegemony Cruiser Dominance." The transmission crackled. "We are under attack by human forces in the Rigel system. Request immediate assistance. By the void, they're not stopping. We surrender! We surrender! They're ignoring our surrender." Admiral Thexani's eyes narrowed to slits. "What's a hegemony vessel doing in Federation space?" The answer came from the tactical display. The Rigel system housed a joint Federation human research station, established just 1 month ago as part of humanity's integration into galactic society. If hegemony forces were attacking it, they're testing human resolve, Zethkar said quietly. Just as Captain Chen predicted, the transmissions from Rigel continued, each one more desperate than the last. They've destroyed our escort fleet. Human vessels are pursuing our command ship. We invoke the Accords of Sanctuary. We invoke the Accords. Director Koss manipulated his console, pulling up real-time sensor data from Federation monitoring stations. I'm reading. This can't be right. 17 hegemony warships engaged with 6 human vessels. Correction, came an update from the sensors operator. 12 hegemony warships. 5 have been destroyed in the last 4 minutes. Zethkar watched the tactical display with grim familiarity. The human ships moved with the same relentless purpose he had witnessed at Kepler, but their effectiveness had improved dramatically. These weren't converted civilian vessels. These were purpose-built warships designed with 6 weeks of lessons learned from their first encounter. Patch me through to the human fleet, Admiral Thexani commanded. The response came immediately. Federation Command, this is Admiral Rodriguez aboard the TDS Retribution. Be advised that we are engaged in lawful defense of Federation facilities against hegemony aggression. Admiral Rodriguez, this is Admiral Thexani, Federation Fleet Command. We appreciate your defense of the research station, but surely you can accept the hegemony surrender at this point. The laugh that echoed through the command center was the same sound Zethkar remembered from Captain Chen, glass breaking mixed with distant thunder. Admiral, the hegemony didn't attack the research station. They attacked the nursery we built next to it. 47 children ages 3 to 8 were killed in their opening barrage. There will be no acceptance of surrender. Silence filled the command center. Every species represented among Federation Command understood the implication. The hegemony had deliberately targeted human children to test human resolve. They had succeeded beyond their worst nightmares. Admiral Rodriguez, Thexani tried again. The Accords of Sanctuary are ancient law. Even the most aggressive species respect them. We're not the most aggressive species, Admiral. We're something else entirely. We're the species you teach your children to fear when they won't go to sleep. And someone just reminded us why. On the tactical display, the remaining hegemony ships scattered in full retreat, but human vessels pursued with mechanical precision, running down each fleeing ship despite their speed disadvantage. How are they catching ships with superior velocity? Director Koss demanded. Zethkar studied the pursuit patterns. They're not trying to catch them. They're herding them, driving them toward predetermined intercept points. As he spoke, new contacts appeared on the display. More human ships, perfectly positioned to eliminate the retreating hegemony forces. The coordination required for such tactics suggested planning that had begun weeks ago. They knew this was coming. Zethkar breathed. They've been preparing for someone to test them again. The final hegemony transmission was brief and terrified. This is dominance. Human forces have surrounded us. They're demanding we transmit our base coordinates and fleet deployments. If we refuse, they'll execute our crew one by one and broadcast it to Hegemony Command. That's a war crime, Director Koss protested. Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through any discussion. Director, we're no longer bound by your definitions of criminal behavior. We're operating under human law now, and human law is very simple. Hurt our children, face extinction. Within hours, the Rigel engagement was over. 18 hegemony warships had been eliminated completely. No survivors, no prisoners, no witnesses except the sensor recordings that human forces deliberately transmitted to every major power in the region. They're not just winning battles, Admiral Thexani observed. They're broadcasting warnings to every species that might consider testing them. Zethkar nodded grimly. Admiral, I think we need to reconsider humanity's status in galactic civilization. They're not the junior partners we thought we were welcoming. They're the apex predators we accidentally taught to hunt. The implications settled over the command center like a heavy shadow. The galaxy had just watched a species transform from peaceful colonists to remorseless destroyers in the span of 6 weeks, and everyone understood that this was only the beginning.